conditioned souls. Kalpataruvisha, Vipasindhuvyevicha, Patitanam Pavanebo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Okay? So it's probably interfere. Forget about the garland. All right, happy Janmashtami to everybody. Okay, it's not that many people, so it's not that dangerous. So, yeah, anybody who's been exposed in the outside before, don't get too close to me during class, okay? All right, ready? Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Malaba Yidibhadat Hauti Gopijana Malaba Yidibhadat Hauti Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tera Panacharte Yamuna Tera Vanacharte Jai Hurat Om Madhava Kunda Vihare Jai Ranhu Madhava Kunja Vihare Gopijana Malaba Girivarudhavute Gopijana Malaba Girivarudhavute Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tera Panachagute Yamuna Tera Panachare Jayurad Om Madhava Kunja Bihati Jayurad Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravedikacharya. All Sutara Sutashi Shimad, His Divine Grace. Abhaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai. Maturadam Ki Jai. Jagadava Sami Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Shrimati Dalasi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharni Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadeja Tarni. So, Om Gana Timidandasha Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur and Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, happy Janmashtami to everybody. And so, what we'd like to do, what's that? Haribol. Haribol. So what we like to do this morning is do something a little interesting, but I wanted to start out with Srila Prabhupada's words before we talk about the demons in Krishna's pastimes and the anarthas. And in that light, there's a very important verse in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which I've often said is like the nutshell verse of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and that's 10.1.4. And Prabhupada would quote this verse very often, and I wanted to read, before I start talking about demons. Yeah, I know that. Before I start talking about demons, which is everybody's favorite topic, more than Krishna actually, before I start talking about demons and the anarthas they represent, and actually read some quotes from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur about anarthas. Can everyone hear me clearly? Okay, just want to make sure. I wanted to read from Srila Prabhupada's translation and commentary on this most important verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10.1.4. And those of you who want to can read along with me. So, I'm going to go through rather quickly. I may say a few words about it, but this is a very, very important verse because this verse actually shows us how, if we hear about Krishna's pastimes and if we are not sinful, we can actually achieve the highest goal of human life, which is pure Krishna consciousness. So I'll just read the Sanskrit. Nivritta Tarsharupagiyamanad Bhavoshadat Shotra Mano Viramat Kautama Shloka Gunanuvadat Puman Virajeta Puma Vina Pashugnat. And the translation is, glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is performed in the Parampara system. That is, it is conveyed from spiritual master to disciple. Such glorification is relished by those no longer interested in the false, temporary glorification of this cosmic manifestation. So a lot of this translation, you'll notice, is actually purported translation. It's not contained within the original Sanskrit. So Prabhupada's translations actually are commentaries in many cases. You know, sometimes people will say, well, Prabhupada didn't literally translate everything. Well, he knew Krishna's intention, or he knew the intention of Srila Vyasadeva and Shukadeva Goswami and the other speakers of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada was able to convey that intention and expand on the words. Just like the original Bhagavatam was only 4 verses that were spoken by Lord Vishnu to Lord Brahma, beginning with Aham eva sameva gre nanyadyat sadasat param. And those 4 verses were expanded on. Ultimately, Vyasadeva expanded, he divided the Vedas, that's Vyas. And Vyasadeva expanded, and Shukadeva Goswami expanded. And all these great acharyas, they actually expand the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's what you'll notice in this translation. Descriptions of the Lord are the right medicine for the conditioned soul undergoing repeated birth and death. Therefore, who will cease hearing such glorification of the Lord except a butcher or one who is killing his own self? So that's why Prabhupada would sometimes say that if someone is eating meat, he will not be able to understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, or will not be attracted. So Prabhupada's purport, and it's a rather lengthy purport, so I'm going to try to read it quickly. In India, it is the practice among the general populace to hear about Krishna either from Bhagavad Gita or from Srimad Bhagavatam in order to gain relief from the disease of repeated birth and death. Although India is now fallen, when there is a message that someone will speak about Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, thousands of people still gather to hear. This verse indicates, however, that such recitation of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam must be done by persons completely freed from material desires, nivritta tarshahe. Everyone within this material world, beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant, is full of material desires for sense enjoyment, and everyone is busy in sense gratification. But when thus engaged, one cannot fully understand the value of Krishna Katha, either in the form of Bhagavad Gita or in Srimad Bhagavatam. If we hear the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from liberated persons, this hearing will certainly free us from the bondage of material activities. But hearing Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by a professional reciter cannot actually help us to achieve liberation. Krishna Katha, and actually Sanatana Goswami, quoted from the Hari Bhakti Shuddhaya, says, Vaishnava Makod Girnam Putam Hari Katam Ritam Shabbadanaiva Karitavyam Sharpo Chishti Yatapayam. That if, not only will it not help one become freed from the material entanglement, but it will actually entangle one further. He gives this example, hearing about Krishna from those who are not nivritta taishar, those who are not devoid of these desires, then that will actually be like milk touched by the lips of a serpent. It can actually have a poisonous effect. And so we have to be really careful who we hear Krishna Katha from. Really, really careful. I know sometimes devotees are very interested in hearing certain kirtans by professional singers who are not even vegetarians. And they play them in the temple sometimes, and it'll actually pollute the mind. Why? Because it has the modes of nature connected to it. Karnam guna sangasha sarasa janma jonisha. Krishna Katha is very simple, and Bhagavad Gita has said that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As he himself explains, Matak paraturam nanyat kinchit asti dhanajaya. O Arjuna, there is no truth superior to me. That's from the Gita 7:7. Simply by understanding this fact that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can become a liberated person. But especially in this age, because people are interested in hearing Bhagavad Gita from unscrupulous persons who depart from the simple presentation of Bhagavad Gita and distort it for their personal satisfaction, they fail to derive the real benefit. There are big scholars, politicians, philosophers, and scientists who speak on Bhagavad Gita in their own polluted way. And people in general hear from them, being uninterested in hearing the glories of the Srimad, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from a devotee. A devotee is one who has no other motive for reciting Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam than to serve the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has therefore advised us to hear the glories of the Lord from a realized person, Bhagavata Parodiya Bhagavata Stane. And of course, now we're hearing from Prabhupada, who was a realized person, as Nietzsche said, a devotee. Unless one is personally a realized soul in the science of Krishna consciousness, a neophyte should not approach him to hear about the Lord. For this is strictly forbidden by Srila Sanatana Goswami, who quotes from the Padma Purana. It's also in the Hari Bhakti Shuddhaya, and this is the verse I just quoted before. Avaishnava Mukod Girnam Putam Harikatam Ratam Shavanam Naiva Kartavyam Sarpo Tishtam Yatapaya. One should avoid hearing from a person not situated in Vaishnava behavior. A Vaishnava is Nivrita Trishna. That is, he has no material purpose, for his only purpose is to preach Krishna consciousness. So-called scholars, philosophers, and politicians exploit the importance of Bhagavad Gita by distorting its meaning for their own purposes. Therefore, this verse warns that Krishna Katha should be recited by a person who is Nivrita Trishna. Shukadeva Goswami epitomizes the proper reciter for Srimad Bhagavatam, and Parikshit Maharaj, who purposefully left his kingdom and family prior to meeting death, epitomizes the person fit to hear it. A qualified reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam gives the right medicine, bhavoshati, for the conditioned souls. The Krishna consciousness movement is therefore trying to train qualified preachers to recite Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita throughout the entire world, so that people in general in all parts of the world may take advantage of this movement and thus be relieved of the threefold miseries of material existence. The instructions of Bhagavad Gita and the descriptions of Srimad Bhagavatam are so pleasing that almost anyone suffering from the threefold miseries of material existence will desire to hear the glories of the Lord from these books and thus benefit on the path of liberation. Two classes of men, however, will never be interested in hearing the message of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Those who were determined, those who were determined to commit suicide, and those determined to kill cows and other animals for the satisfaction of their tongues. Although such persons may make a show of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam at a Bhagavata Saptaha, that means a 7-day recital of the Bhagavatam, done by professional people, this is but another creation of the karmis who cannot derive any benefit from such a performance. The word pashugnat is important in this connection. Pashugna means butcher. Persons fond of performing ritualistic ceremonies for elevation to higher planetary systems must offer sacrifices, yagyas, by killing animals. Lord Buddhadev therefore rejected the authority of the Vedas because his mission was to stop animal sacrifices, which are recommended in Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. Nindasi yagya videraha shuti jatam sadaya vridaya darshita pashugatam keshavadrita muda sharira jaya jagadisha hate. That's from the Gita Govinda. Even though animal sacrifices are sanctioned in Vedic ceremonies, men who kill animals for such ceremonies are considered butchers. Butchers cannot be interested in Krishna consciousness, for they are already materially allured. Their only interest lies in developing comforts for the temporary body. Bhogashvarya prashaktanam taya pratchetasam vyavasayatmaka buddhi samhado na vidhyate. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence and are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination of devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. That's from the Gita 2.4.4. Srila Narottam Thakur says, Manusha Janma Payo Radhakrishna Nabhashiya Janiya Shunya Vishakainu. Anyone who is not Krishna conscious and who therefore does not engage in the service of the Lord is also Pashugna, for he is willingly drinking poison. Such a person cannot be interested in Krishna Katha because he still has a desire for material sense gratification. He is not Nivritta Trishna. As it is said, Traivargikaste Purusha Vimukta Harimeda Saha. Those interested in Trivarga, that is in Dharma, Artha, and Kama, are religious for the sake of achieving a material position with which to gain better facilities for sense gratification. Such persons are killing themselves by willingly keeping themselves in the cycle of birth and death. They cannot be interested in Krishna consciousness. For Krishna Katha, topics about Krishna consciousness, there must be a speaker and hearer, both of whom can be interested in Krishna consciousness. If they are no longer interested in material topics, one can actually see how this attitude automatically develops in persons who are Krishna conscious. Although the devotees of the Krishna conscious movement are quite young men and young ladies, they no longer read materialistic newspapers, magazines, and so on, for they are no longer interested in such topics. Nivritta Tarshahai. They completely give up the bodily understanding of life for topics concerning Uttama Shloka, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual master speaks, and the disciple hears with attention. Unless both of them are free from material desires, they cannot be interested in topics of Krishna consciousness. The spiritual master and disciple do not need to understand anything more than Krishna, because simply by understanding Krishna and talking about Krishna, one becomes a perfectly learned person. Yasmin vigate sarvamevam vigatam bhavati, Mundaka Upanishad 1.3. That means, actually, translation is, one who knows Krishna knows everything. Now, of course, it doesn't mean, I have to really unpack that, it doesn't mean that you know how to fix cars just because you know about Krishna. Or you know the history of India or the history of the United States because you know about Krishna. But you know the purpose of everything. And because you know the purpose of everything, you know how to engage everything in Krishna's service. Prabhupada actually gave the example one time about Henry Ford. Henry Ford was actually accused of not being so intelligent because he didn't know too much about, science or stuff like that. I mean, of course, he did know how to organize things. But anyway, he was accused once, and then Prabhupada tells the story that he showed how he was more intelligent. How did he show he was more intelligent? He showed the judge or whoever was like passing judgment a row of buttons. And he says, I have this row of buttons. If I need to know something, I'll push a particular button and the person will come running. So who was more important? The person who was going to serve Henry Ford or Henry Ford? Henry Ford's a more important person, obviously, because he knows how to engage everybody. So, of course, Henry Ford doesn't know how to engage everybody, but at least in his business he did, the Ford Motor Company. So one who knows Krishna knows how to engage, and if he needs to acquire some knowledge about something, he knows where to go to get that knowledge. But he doesn't acquire knowledge just for knowledge's sake. The Lord sits within everyone's heart, and by the grace of the Lord, the devotee receives instructions directly from the Lord himself, who says in Bhagavad Gita, Sarvasya chahamriti sanavishto mataksmritir gyanamaponam cha vedaischa saveraham eva vedyo vedanta kred vedavid eva chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. Krishna consciousness is so exalted that one who is perfectly situated in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the spiritual master is fully satisfied by reading Krishna Kathas found in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and similar Vedic literatures. Since merely talking about Krishna is so pleasing, we can simply imagine how pleasing it is to render service to Krishna. When discourses on Krishna Katha take place between a liberated spiritual master and the disciple, others also sometimes take advantage of hearing these topics and also benefit. These topics are the medicine to stop the repetition of birth and death, the cycle of repeated birth and death by which one takes on different bodies again and again is called bhava, or bhava rog. Bhava means to become, in other words, again and again. If anyone willingly or unwillingly hears Krishna Katha, his bhava rog, the disease of birth and death, will certainly stop. Therefore, Krishna Katha is called bhavoshadha, the remedy to stop the repetition of birth and death. Karmis, or persons attached to material sense enjoyment, generally cannot give up their material desires, but Krishna Katha is such a potent medicine that if one is induced to hear Krishna Kirtan, he will certainly be freed from this disease. A practical example is Dhruva Maharaj, who at the end of his tapasya was fully satisfied. When the Lord wanted to give Dhruva benediction, Dhruva refused it. Swamin kritartosmi varam nayache, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Majjali, the 22:42. My dear Lord, he said, I am fully satisfied. I do not ask for any benediction for material sense gratification. We actually see that even young boys and girls in the Krishna conscious movement have given up their long habits, long practice of bad habits like illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling, because Krishna consciousness is so potent that it gives them full satisfaction. They are no longer interested in material sense gratification. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So that's the point. We hear about Krishna, and one of my favorite topics concerning Krishna are the killing of demons. And why is it one of my favorite topics? Because the demons represent what? Anarthas. And in order to progress in Krishna consciousness, we have to deal with anarthas. So hopefully we'll have enough time before we greet the deities to talk about most of the demons, if not all the demons. But I wanted to read a statement by Bhaktivinoda Thakur concerning the demons and anarthas, and then we'll get into the demons in Krishna's pastimes, the prominent demons. Actually, there were a lot more demons than we hear about in the Krishna book. We just hear about a few demons, but Krishna had to deal with so many demons practically every day. Demons and different pastimes every day. I mean, Krishna was in Vrindavan for so many years, so that means 365 days in a year, 12 years in Vrindavan, and you could do the mathematics, and there were so many interesting things that occurred every day. But these are the prominent demons mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So here's Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statement. The devotee who worships the holy name should first petition, very important statement, the Lord for the strength to cast out these unfavorable tendencies. So in other words, before we start chanting, we should pray to the Lord for the strength just to kick out these demons. Of course, it's sometimes mentioned that demons and the devotees are in the same body in Kali Yuga. In the previous Yuga, it was pretty easy to distinguish who was a demon. If someone was flying in the air like Putana, Khechari. Khechari is not Khichari. Khechari means a witch that can fly in the air with an uprooted tree. That's why we have brooms here in the West. It's more efficient. So that's obvious. If you see someone flying through the air, that's a witch. But we have these little witches in our heart, or big witches in our heart, so this is really important. We pray to the Lord for the strength to cast out these unfavorable tendencies, and should pray thus before Lord Hari on a daily basis. So this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur giving us this instruction. We pray on a daily basis. By doing this regularly, the devotee's heart will eventually become purified. Doing this referring to the prayers to cast out these unfavorable things. So on a regular basis, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is advocating this. Sri Krishna has killed a number of demons which may arise in the kingdom of the heart. So here he's directly equating the demons with the anarthas in the heart. So in order to destroy these problems, a devotee must cry very humbly before the Lord and admit defeat. Then the Lord will nullify all contaminations. And of course, this reminds me of Draupadi's situation. Draupadi was fighting with the Kauravas, Dushashan in particular, and she admitted defeat. I can't deal with this. I can't fight against Dushashan. He's trying to disrobe me. And then she threw her hands up and said, Krishna. And once you do that, and you beg Krishna to remove these contaminations, then Krishna will help you. Okay, so let's go to the demons. How about that? So who's the first one? Anyone know? Putana. So Putana represents the pseudo-guru. Pseudo-guru means like a false guru who preaches sense gratification or liberation and engages his disciples in such a way. But another meaning of pseudo-guru, whoops, sorry about that. Another meaning of pseudo-guru is our own mind. You understand? Because we take, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the inwardly manifest spiritual guide in the form of the mundane empiric reasoning faculty, that is the material mind, is also like Putana. So, we take guidance on the mind. I know best, or even worse, from the senses. But we should take guidance from the intelligence fixed in Krishna consciousness, just like the story or the metaphor given by Srila Prabhupada in the Bhagavad Gita and also in the Upanishads, is the body is like a chariot, and the horses are the senses, and the reins are the mind, and the driver is the intelligence. And Prabhupada one time said the intelligence is this close to the supersoul, in the sense, matak smritir jnanamaponam cha, that when you desire something, supersoul gives you specific intelligence, and if you have the right desire, you'll get the right intelligence. But if you have the wrong desire, then that's the pseudo-guru, and then you get the wrong intelligence, and then the mind will take over. So we have to be really careful in taking direction from the mind. We take it so seriously. So another statement by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in order to show mercy to his devotees, Krishna sucks the life out of Putana's breast to protect his innocent ecstasy, which has arisen within the young devotees' hearts. You just picture that. It's like Krishna sucked the life out of Putana. And so Krishna sucks the life out of, Putana in our heart. You just picture that when we take shelter of him and beg him in this way. And just a little information, according to the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, in her last life, Putana was Ratnamala, the younger sister of Bali Maharaj. I told that story the other night in class, that actually when Lord Vamanadeva came to interfere with the sacrifice of Bali Maharaj, then Ratnamala, she saw Lord Vamanadeva, who was very cute, cute, short Brahmin. And she thought, wow, I'd love to be his mother. And then, guess what? Then he pulled his tricks and took everything away from Bali Maharaj and pushed him down to the netherworlds. And she thought, I may be his mother, but I'm going to kill him. And so, little mixed desires there. So amongst all the demons, she achieved something very, very special when she was killed by Krishna, because her desire was actually motherly mixed with violence. But Krishna got rid of the violent aspect, and sucked her life air out, and she got to get the same position as Yashodamaya in the spiritual world. It's not that she was directly the mother. There's so many mothers of Krishna in the spiritual world. Nobody can become Yashodamaya. She is actually Krishna's eternal mother. But she got a similar position in the spiritual world. And most of the other demons, they just got liberated. Liberated means, good old Brahma Jyoti. And of course, according to the Bhagavatam, Aruya Kajena Parampadam, they again come down. I mean, they were actually demons. So Putin was very, 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 very lucky. So, anyway, let's get to the next interesting demon. There's the Shakatasura. And the Shakatasura demon, let's talk a little bit about him. That's a cart demon. So Krishna was actually put under this cart when Yashodamaya was doing this festival. I was reading this last night in the Krishna book. And, whoops. Let me get to my notes. So Shakatasura represents the load-carrying mentality arising out of old and new bad habits from this life and previous life. Also represents lethargy, dullness, and false pride. Krishna removed this contamination by kicking it aside. So we can actually visualize Krishna's lotus feet. Kicking aside our lethargy, dullness, contamination. And it's just like trying to be an ass. What does it mean trying to be? An ass, I probably would often use that example of carrying a burden and just getting a little grass at the end of the day. And probably would sometimes say that no matter how hard you work, how many chapatis can you eat? 3 or 4, whatever. You can eat, you can work very hard, you can have a skyscraper, and the whole thing is going to be a source of anxiety for you. So, that's Shakatasura, and Krishna kicked him aside, and of course the cart was just thrown to pieces, and Krishna was not hurt. Krishna kicked the wheel. That's what was described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So according to the Garga Samhita, he wasn't a cart. He's the cart demon, but he's not a cart. He had a body made of air, and he was trying to make the cart fall on Lord Krishna's head to kill Lord Krishna. So, in his previous life, here's the explanation, he was the son of Hiranyaksha, and his name was Utkacha. So one time he went to the hermitage of this great sage named Lomasa Muni, and he broke some trees there, and he just tried to demolish the hermitage, and he was cursed to become bodiless. And he begged at the Muni's feet, begged for mercy, and the Muni told him in the next life he would be touched by the foot of the Lord and would be liberated. So he got that benediction. So that's Katasura. We call him the cart demon, but actually he had a body made of air. Next demon. Who is that? That's the cart demon, same demon. Another nice picture of the cart demon. I thought I'd share this picture. Really interesting. Next demon is Trinavarta. So Trinavarta, he represents false pride produced by useless scholarship. What's that? And this, let's see, he gives rise to debates, arguments, dry reasoning, logical indulgences in the association of people who are attached to such things. So that reminds me of Queen Kunti's prayer, Janma Ishvarya Shutasha Shibir Idamana Dalpuman, where she says there's certain opulences that people may have in this world that bewilder one, and one of those opulences is too much learning or too much intelligence. So I'll read a little bit more. And it produces controversy which is disloyal to the path of pure bhakti, such as Mayavad philosophy and Buddhism. These are Bhaktivinoda Thakur's works. It is the breeding place of demoniac sinful philosophies. Lord Krishna becomes moved by the humility of his devotees who carefully avoid this fault, and he strangles the demon and removes the thorn from his devotees' endeavors in devotional service. So you can just actually picture Krishna strangling our false pride, or pride in our learning. And Krishna does that. According to the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, in his last life, he was the king of a place called Panjadesh named Sahasraksha, who was cursed by Durvasa Muni because he appeared naked before him while the king was enjoying with his 1,000 wives, and he appeared before Durvasa Muni. And he was cursed to live on earth for 100,000 years and then be killed by Lord Krishna. It's an interesting story. So false pride. Next interesting demon They're not actually demons. The next ones are not demons. Sorry about that. As Manigriva and Nalakuvara. But, they represent like a demoniac mentality. They're not actually demons. So, in the Bhagavatam, this is described that this is the pride coming from feeling that one has a lot of money and aristocratic birth. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it gives rise to cruelty for animals, lust for women, and indulgence in alcohol. He says these further give rise to debauchery of the tongue, uncontrolled eating habits, and loose talking. Then come general hard-heartedness, shamelessness, and all sorts of disgraceful activities. And of course, again, Queen Kunti's prayer, Janma Aishvarya, Shritasya, Shibir, Aishvarya. Money. In Kali Yuga, of course, there's the statements that gold or hoarding gold is a repository of Kali. So if one actually becomes proud of whatever opulences one has, especially money, then these different anarthas arise, cruelty to animals, lust, and everything. And it's described that Krishna very mercifully breaks down the twin Arjun trees while tied to the grinding mortar in order to destroy these faults. So you can actually picture this particular pastime of Krishna doing that, or tearing down, or breaking apart your attachment to opulence. Okay. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, also, it's very interesting to note that the remedy applied by Narada Muni, poverty, or in terms of which we're particularly relevant to ourselves as aspiring devotees, simple living and high things. That's not Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that's a commentary by a devotee. So in other words, the tree is poverty-stricken. The tree has nothing. And so that was the remedy. So, next, that's another picture. Next is Vatsasura. Vatsasura, of course, is the calf demon. And the calf, it was a demon who actually acted as a calf, and then he was killed by Krishna, as you see here in the picture. Krishna is taking him by his tail, whirling him, and killing him. It's an interesting story about Vatsasura, a side story that involves the Manasa Ganga around Govardhan. Manasa Ganga is supposed to be the biggest lake or biggest body of water in Braj. So what happened is that Krishna killed this demon, the Vatsasura demon, and what happened is the coward boys, they were shocked that Krishna had killed a calf or a cow. And they said, Krishna, you're very sinful. Similar to the story of Aristasura being killed, where the gopis said to Krishna, we're not going near you because you're very sinful. So in this particular story, the coward boys said that Krishna, you're very sinful, you have to go to the Ganges to expiate your sin. And so he said, I'm not going to the Ganges. I'm going to create the Ganges here in Vrindavan. So out of his mind, he created the Ganges, and that's called the Manasa Ganga. And there's so many nice stories about this Manasa Ganga. Krishna had many pastimes where he tricked the gopis, and he acted as a boatman on the Manasa Ganga. So many interesting. One time, Nanda Maharaj wanted to go to the Ganges. Krishna wouldn't let him go, and Krishna had Ganga Devi come out of the Manasa Ganga, showing that she actually was there. So that's the Manasa Ganga. So as far as Vatsasura is concerned, represents a childish mentality, which is all right for children. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said it's all right for children to be childish and mischievous. And I was just reading about Krishna, that even Krishna is always childish and mischievous, at least in Vrindavan. No matter how old he is, or that is, what age he exhibits, he always has this childish, mischievous demeanor to him. Of course, we know about the different aspects of Krishna's personality. Dhiradatta, Dhiradatta, Dhirprasanta, and Dhiralalita, very playful. So these 4 qualities are always there. So in Krishna, this is very adorable. But Vatsasura represents a childish mentality, mischievous and too easily influenced by bad association. It gives rise to a type of greediness for sense gratification through which one becomes absorbed in materialism. You know, just like not quite innocence, just naivety. You know, everybody understands naivety? That you, like Prabhupada said, you Western boys and girls are not enough afraid of Maya. And you Indian boys and girls, same thing. You're not enough afraid. So you're just naive, you know, you think you can just take 1 drop of Maya and it won't hurt, you know, just 1 time, it's not going to hurt. But then you get sucked in. It's not, Maya's like a whirlpool that just like sucks you in and then you can't do anything about it. So anyway, so one should not be naive and have this childish mentality. One should be very, very astute, on guard, always looking for Krishna consciousness. So according to the Garga Samhita, so he's the demon that represents this childish mentality in adults. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments elsewhere, that's all right, children can have that mentality. So don't go around chastising children for being childish. That would be very bad. So according to the Garga Samhita, in the last birth, he was a demon named Pramila, the son of Mura. Remember the Mura demon from the Krishna book? He fought with Krishna when Krishna was on the back of Garuda. He conquered the demigods in battle and then entered into the sage Vashishta's ashram and saw Vashishta's cow named Nandini. Pramila wanted that cow, so he disguised himself as a Brahmin and tried to beg for her. The cow spoke and said, "You are a demon in disguise. For this offense, you will have to appear as a calf." Pramila then surrendered to Vashishta and begged for mercy. And Vashishta Muni said that after taking birth as a calf, he would be liberated by the Lord. And actually, I should read this. This is from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in Vatsasura. And this is from his magazine, The Harmonist. He represents evils that are peculiar to boyhood. The neophyte is extremely susceptible to such evils. You know, naivety, which I discussed before. They can only be eliminated by the mercy of Krishna. If one engages in Krishna's service, they will be completely eradicated at an early stage. He says, there is an English proverb that sowing wild oats is inevitable at a young age. The term Puritanism was originally coined to express the protest of boys and young men against any undue curtailment of the scope of enjoyment that should be regarded as permissible to them. Boys and young men claim the right to be merry and frolicsome. There's nothing objectionable and much that is of positive value in the display of these juvenile qualities. If the attempt be made to stifle this innocent play of the boyish nature under the impression that it is an exhibition of sensuousness, and for that reason is as harmful as similar comment on the part of grown-up persons, this is what I was talking about before, the result is not assurance, but discouragement of juvenile innocence. In other words, young people, like children, should be encouraged to be juveniles. But older people should not be encouraged to be juveniles. Okay, so that's that. Let's go to the next one. We won't be able to finish all the demons, unfortunately. Then there's the next one is Aghasura. Whoops. So Aghasura, he's the snake demon. You know, he opened up his mouth, and the coward boys, they were assured that Krishna was going to save them, and they just had a good time. And they actually knew it was a demon because he had bad breath. You know, like a fishy smell. You know, I knew it wasn't just a cave. So they marched in, and Krishna went in to follow him. First, Krishna was just wondering, you know, what am I going to do? This is his yoga maya. And then he marched into the mouth and expanded himself and killed the Aghasura demon. The spirit spark from Aghasura entered into him, and he brought the coward boys back to life. So Aghasura, the snake demon, represents the mentality of cruelty to others and violence and causing trouble to others out of envy. That's an offense against the chanting of the holy names, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It may also manifest in the form of an unwillingness to help other living entities by giving them Krishna consciousness. In other words, not being willing, even though you have the knowledge, you have the ability to give people prasadam, to give people the holy name, just like being a kripana, a miserly person. So we should remember this pastime of Krishna expanding himself and killing this Aghasura to help us overcome this tendency. According to the Garga Samhita, in his previous life, he was Agha, the son of Shakatasura. He had a very attractive body of which he was very proud. One time he saw the Muni, Ashtavakra Muni. Ashtavakra means he's a Muni curved in 8 places. His body looked unusual. Whose body was, I don't want to say disfigured, but looked unusual. And he laughed and he said, "Who is this ugly person?" The sage cursed him to become the ugliest snake on earth. A god then fell at his feet and begged for mercy, so the sage blessed him that he would be delivered by Lord Krishna. So you see, in all these stories, most of these stories, you have a cursing that's being done by a sage, like Narada Muni cursing Manigriva and Nalakuvara. And that cursing was not done out of cruelty to torture the living entity who was being cursed. That cursing was actually made to rectify the consciousness of the person, to give them mercy. So when a sage curses, it's not out of uncontrolled anger. Like uncontrolled anger generally comes in this world. Jayato visha pumsam sangostesha pajayate sangat sanjayate kama karoto pajayate. When one is frustrated in his desires, then when you get angry, that's an exhibition of the frustration. So the sages, their anger is out of compassion. Okay. Next is not a demon. Of course, Lord Brahma is not a demon. But this is called the Brahma Vimohana Leela, where Lord Brahma stole the calves and the coward boys for a year on the earth planet. And Krishna, during that time, expanded himself as all the calves and the coward boys. And Lord Brahma came back, and he was shocked to see the same calves and coward boys. And then what happened is that Krishna manifested all the coward boys and calves as 4-armed Vishnu forms, which they were, because they were his expansions. So at this pastime of the bewilderment of Lord Brahman and subsequent purification frees us from the cultivation of fruitive activities, karma, and speculative knowledge. It also rectifies the offense of disrespecting the Lord's Madhurya feature in favor of his Aishvarya feature. So in other words, Lord Brahma saw this sweet feature of Krishna, and he thought, this couldn't be God, right? That's Madhurya's feature. This couldn't be God, what's happening here? And he thought, God is, 4 hands, and he does all sorts of things, miraculous things, and he's just playing with the coward boys, what's happening? So he wanted to test. And so, in other words, he was neglecting the Madhurya feature in favor of thinking the Aishvarya feature was more important, and Krishna was showing him the Madhurya feature is more important. And so that's really important for us to understand too. So next demon is Bakasura. Whoops. And Bakasura, of course, he's I guess a stork or a duck or whatever. And he tried to swallow Krishna, and Krishna went into his mouth, and all the coward boys were very nervous, thinking that Krishna was actually going to be swallowed by this Bakasura demon. And then Krishna came out and bifurcated his beaks, killed him in this way. So Bakasura represents cunning, duplicity, deceptive behavior, hypocrisy, and just a false lifestyle of cheating activities. When one portrays himself or herself as something different from what they are. So, according to the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, In his last life, his name was Sahotra, a Gandharva disciple of Durvasa Muni, along with his three brothers who became Palamba, and Keshi. He performed austerities at Pushkatirtha, the Lord Brahma. Once the three of them were picking lotuses at the celestial lake, Chitra Sarovara, for offering to Lord Krishna, when they were arrested by the servants of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva received them very nicely, but told them that Parvati would curse anyone who took lotuses from that lake, as she had vowed after 1,000 lotuses to offer 1,000 lotuses a day to Lord Krishna for 100 days, and there were exactly 100,000 lotuses there, some of which they had now picked. So they had to appear as demons, but they were killed by Krishna and got liberation. So that's Bakasura, cunning duplicity. Next demon. Oh, here's one of my favorite. Dhenukasura. So Dhenukasura, of course, is the ass demon, and he was killed by Balaram. Hare Krishna. Dhenukasura was killed by Balaram, and it was in the Talavan forest, and the coward boys wanted to eat the fruits of the Talavan forest, and they begged Krishna and Balaram to take them to the Talavan forest, and Balaram started shaking the trees and getting some of the fruits, and then Dhenukasura came and he kicked Balaram, and Balaram just whipped him around and threw him up in the tree, and then all the other asses came and attacked Krishna and Balaram, and they were all thrown into trees by Krishna and Balaram, and it looked like ass trees, basically. There were so many of them in the tree. So what on earth does Dhenukasura represent? He represents the ignorance of knowledge of the soul through gross materialistic intelligence and jackass-like foolishness. Mudha. Namam duskritino mudha prapajante naradama mayaya pratigyana masodam bhavamasrita, as Krishna says in the Gita. There's people who don't approach him. Namam duskritino mudha, those are like asses. You're just working for a little grass, like we mentioned before. Prapajante naradama, lowest of mankind, uncivilized. Mayaya pratigyana, those whose knowledge is stolen by illusion. And asuram bhavamasrita, those who are actually dedicated to trying to decry the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, anyway, according to the Garga Samhita, in his previous life, he was the son of Bali Maharaj, named Sahasika. He offended Durvasa Muni by disturbing him when the Muni was meditating by making a lot of noise while he was enjoying with 10,000 women on Mount Gandhamadana. Durvasa cursed him to become an ass, saying, "Fool, ass-like person, become an ass. O demon, after 400,000 years in the transcendental circle of Mathura, in the sacred forest of Talavan, you will attain liberation by Lord Balaram's hand." He could not be killed by Krishna because he had given his word to Prahlad Maharaj that he would not kill any of his family members. So, of course, we understand the demons killed by Lord Balaram represent something very special. What do they represent? They represent, of course, Lord Balaram's the original spiritual master. They represent the demoniac mentality that one has to deal with by following the instructions of the spiritual master. In other words, have to deal with according or with one's own effort. It's not that you just say, Krishna, you take care of this, but you have to hear the instructions. Whoops. I guess we have to end now. And we didn't even get halfway through the demons. I'm disappointed. All right. Jai Shri Shri Radhagolokananda, Radhagolokananda ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Radhagolokananda.
Thursday is this, what time is this?
Govindam Adi Purusham
Amaham bhajami. Angani asa sagalan Priyatri Te Ashanti Pan Yanti Ram Jaganti Angana Chinayat Saru Jwala Vikrasha Dam Jai Radha Govinda. Pusham Govinda Bhajami Govinda. Namaho Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Samaniti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gurvani Charane Nivasesha Shunyavare Vasachare Zatarane. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaurata Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaurata Vrinda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaurata Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana, Hare Govinda Jaya Jaya. Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana, Hare Govinda Jaya Jaya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gorakyananda Radha Gorakyananda Radha. Gorakyananda Radha Gorakyananda Radha. Radhe, Radhe Rao, Radhe. Radhe, Radhe, Radhe Rao, Radhe. Radhe, Jai Shri Radhe. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parvacharya, also Teta, Satashi Srimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Chanana, Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Friends, say go Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Dvaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikapatam Sayam Kunda Radhakunda, Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Mathuram Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Lasadevi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shikshashtaka.